All right, Anthony, we want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Hall of Fame because thanks to the internet, we can now track the writers who have released their Hall of Fame ballots and check up on some players that have been in the news recently, and especially because of all of the PED scandals and how that's played out. Things are trending upward, though, for Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. Early returns show them with 70% and 69%, respectively. How long before these guys make it in?
Well, first of all, I always love that these guys have different vote totals. I just find that hilarious. I don't know how you mentally get in there for one and not the other, but, you know, I'll have a better answer to that question after the real vote totals. Obviously, what we're seeing now is, and Ryan Thibodeau does a great job online of tracking the publicly available ballots, but, you know, the ballots publicly available account for maybe, I think we're at like 40% of the expected total. So I think we saw this in the presidential election. Sometimes polling is not exactly the best indicator of things. So we'll see. But obviously they're trending upward, even relative to like a year ago at this time in the you know, the online balloting. So something is up here. And you know, personally, I think those guys are Hall of Famers. I think it's silly to have this assumed omniscience about who was using what and how much it helped them and all these things. I think it's too murky of an area. I think you just kind of judge the numbers for what they are, because I have zero doubt in my mind that there are PED users already in the Hall of Fame and probably more coming, and just guys who haven't been tied to suspicion as publicly. So I don't know what you can do as a voter other than to, you know, take the Hall's guidance, which is the Hall made them available on the ballot, and judge them for their on-the-field merits. And these guys are obviously Hall of Famers under that scenario. So we'll see. I mean, it could be next year, frankly. If these percentages are remotely accurate, that's a really substantial jump from last year. And I know a lot of people are pointing to Bud Selig's induction as a reason or the excuse for that. I think that's silly. You know, if you're a voter and you're using that as your excuse to suddenly change your mind on Bonds and Clemens, I think you were looking for an excuse to change your mind on Bonds and Clemens. Because I think so many of us know and understand that these are Hall of Famers. So it won't be this year, because even in the publicly available ballots, not 75%. But it really could be as soon as next year if this trend is legitimate.
Let's face it, too, and that's across the board as far as Hall of Fames are concerned. There are people who are far worse in terms of character flaws than using PEDs that are enshrined and are lauded as heroes and legends of their sports. So.
Well, we're protecting the sanctity of something that isn't quite as sacred in reality as it is in people's imaginations. I mean, the Hall of Fame obviously has its fair of misfits and not so do-gooders, you know, in society, and it's got some silly entries as well. I mean, a guy like Candy Cummings is in there with no legitimacy to his stats. He's in there because he invented the curveball, but we don't even know if he invented the curveball. So there's a ton of Hall of Famers like that. They're just absolutely, and I'm not suggesting that you take that silliness and move it forward and induct guys who aren't deserving. But what I am suggesting is that the Hall is a gallery. It's a representation of eras, and its intent is a visitor walks through its doors and has an understanding and appreciation of who you know, who were the forebears of their eras. And these guys were. This is not just the greatest hitter of his time and arguably the greatest pitcher of his time, but two of the greatest of all time. So I think they certainly belong in there.
Well, and if you think about it quite literally, Hall of Fame, you can't leave Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens out. I mean, that would be absolutely absurd. Two of the most famous baseball players of all time. So I like to take the literal translation and put those guys in there because, hey, everyone knows who they are, for better or for worse.
Yeah, my only thing is, and I get, like Manny Ramirez is on the ballot now, and I get the complication there. It's a whole different conversation. Manny Ramirez was a proven offender of the PED policy after everything blew up and after, you know, the sport instituted one of the toughest drug policies in the game. So when you're talking about flouting the system then, under those circumstances, then it's a different thing.
Right.
But to me, Bonds and Clemens, you know, their prime years, their era was at a time when the game was totally looking the other way on PED usage. So for me, it's hard to blame them given that environment. We have no idea the percentage of players using, but I'm going to guess it was pretty substantial.